Now we can go.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me. I have a little bit of trouble hearing you, but I hope you won't mind if I ask you to repeat several times if you want to say something. Okay. So I chose this topic, Neural Cellular Automata, Descriptive Complexity, because, well, my PhD was done in some more traditional, on a more traditional topic, bio-inspired computing. So you have automata theory, but also something related to biology. And as we will see, this topic is situated at an interesting intersection. But let's start. So, let's see here. First of all, the spectrum of computation. Now we have a traditional dichotomy here. So, first of all, on the left side, we have a more classical approach. Turing machines, cellular automata, they are distinct, they are discrete, they are exact, they are interpretable, but they are brittle. As we will see, the main example, for example, for a cellular automata is Conway's Game of Life. I don't know if you are, if you know it or not, but I have a slide on it. We'll spend 1-2 minutes on it. It's a fun little example for a cellular automata. Okay, so on the right side, we have modern deep learning, which is robust, which is noise tolerant. That's kind of important, but it's specifically agnostic, it's opaque, it's kind of like a black box. So you give it the input, you get the output, but you are not always certain on how did it give you that output. Sometimes even it will hallucinate an output. Okay, as I said, Neural Cellular Automata is at an interesting intersection here. So we have the more traditional category of automata theory. We have complexity science, from where we get emergence and self-organization. This is like something more a biologist would be interested in. So traditionally, my field of study would have been around here. Well, neural cellular automata seems to be at also an intersection with modern deep learning. So for me personally, it's an interesting occasion to look into something new. I've been trying to look into something new for several years, trying to find an equilibrium between, more traditional stuff, more modern computer science, more practical stuff, for work and such. So this is why I really liked this occasion to talk a bit about the topic. Unfortunately, like I said, it's a novelty even for me. Next slide. So I always like to talk about history first. So we have a timeline for this sort of automata. It all began almost 80 years ago. Von Neumann laid out his theory of self-reproducing automata in the 40s. Conway gamified it in the 70s. And now, recently, we've jumped to NCAs. That the theory was solidified in 2020 when at Google, a certain researcher replaced the traditional lookup tables at Google with a neural network. So, first of all, if we talk about neural cellular automata, it's worth mentioning traditional automata. So a cellular automaton is a discrete model consisting of a grid of cells. So it's a two-dimensional automaton. The best example is Conway's game of life. It's Turing Complete, but it's fragile and lacks homeostasis, meaning there is no return, there's no drive to return to a stable state. So Conway's game of life is a 2D automaton. I have an example, and it implements these rules. So we have the plane split into grids. These yellow cells are called alive, and each cell is alive if it has 2 or 3 neighbors. If it has less than 2 neighbors, it dies at the next step. If it has more than 3 neighbors, then it dies because of overpopulation. Okay? And if we have an input like this and we start the succession of states, we have something like this. So we have examples. This is called a glider because it will repeat its pattern and it will move. We have certain pulsars and we have stable formations like this. Note that this formation was not initially a pulsar, it mutated into one. So we have kind of interesting constructions. Like I said, it's Turing Complete, but it lacks homeostasis, and it's very fragile. I mean, if I don't know if this platform will let me. So if I modify a certain thing, the structure might collapse on itself. Now, what are neural cellular automata? Unlike the discrete CAs, where a cell is either dead or alive, either null or one, but NCA cell is a vector. It is a vector S over L to the power 16. So it's usually represented as like in Conway's example, it's like a grid split into cells, but each cell now is colored a certain way. We have LGA, so this will be 4 elements of the 16 elements here, plus 12 hidden chemical channels. So I won't go deep down into the theoretical stuff, but if you want to, I can give you the bibliography that goes into a deeper description of the topic. Okay. Besides this, we have besides the state vector, we have the perception step. So before a cell acts, it must sense. It does this by convolving its neighborhood with fixed filters to estimate the gradient vectors, these nabla S. This allows the cell to know stuff like, for example, which way is up, where the chemical concentration is the highest, etc. So it's a much more complex system than your regular cellular automaton. It also has what we call the policy. The rule is actually a small multi-layered perceptron. Okay? So it takes this perception vector as input and outputs. So this and outputs a change vector, the delta S. This is what the perceptron does. And then we have the update, which takes the whole automaton from state ST and takes it into the next state. Again, a little bit more just to reference. at the center of it all, there lies what we call convolutional neural network. Okay, this NCA is basically identical to a recurrent residual convolution network. So the thing is that this is the main idea that makes the whole apparatus to be Turing complete. Okay. I'm very bad at time management, so I might skip over some stuff just to make sure I make it all in 30 minutes. So the origin of these. In 2020, Dev published an article in which the experiment was the simulation of growing a lizard, an image of a lizard, of course. So the network was trained to minimize the difference between the grid and the target image. I'll get back to this, but this, let me reset it. So this was the main idea. From one seed, okay, using some rules and a perceptor, you get a target image. Okay. Mathematically, we are performing a continuous relaxation of the Boolean logic found in traditional CAs. So instead of if neighbors equals 3, like in Conway's game of life, then the cell is alive, we learn a smooth sigmoid, a smooth continuous function. The differentiability is what allows us to traverse the optimization landscape. So now I'll try to, we have an idea about what NCAs are, at least a surface idea of what it is. Let's talk a bit about the complexity part. The key concept, we define descriptive complexity as the size of the parameter set, the genotype theta, required to produce the phenotype P. In regular language, it means the size of the parameters of the rules. So the number of rules, for example, needed to produce a certain image. This would be a basic example for it. So we have, for example, I pulled it out from one of the articles. In this chart, we can see that for generating some textures, we have different ideas. So standard CNNs require like 12 million parameters. These ones, a tool developed by NVIDIA, something based also on artificial intelligence. It required 30 million parameters to produce certain textures, while NCAs were programmed that only required 10,000 parameters to produce the same results. So it's clearly more efficient, this manner of computation. So sorry, I'm a little bit nervous on online presentation. It's kind of artificial for me. Let's move on to the core article published in 2025. So Béna et al. In 2025 published an article entitled "A Path to Universal Neural Cellular Automata." The problem was they asked themselves the question: can a noisy, continuous NCA to compute algorithms? And they took the algorithm of matrix multiplication. And they found out that vanishing gradients usually make this impossible over a long time. So let's see what they did here. They introduced something called state partitioning. They took they partitioned the states into mutable and immutable states. One that acted like random access memory, like a RAM, and the others like read-only memory. This prevented something called degradation. Okay, as we will see in my last slides, I give some examples. It will be a little bit more obvious. But the general idea is that using these sorts of NCAs, they manage basically to program, okay, to emulate a program and implement matrix multiplication. Okay. So the result was that they trained the grid to act as a systolic array performing matrix multiplication by passing values locally to compute these dot products. The impact, okay, so the actual was that they actually emulated the full neural network inside the grid. So NCAs are proven to be differentiable universal computers. So not, okay, so they are Turing complete, but also they are basically equivalent to neural networks. Another article published in 2025, so this year, has the core result that determining if a CA is sensitive to initial conditions. So they proved that determining if a CA is sensitive to initial conditions, this is an undecidable problem. The main implication is that formal verification, if an NCA formal verification of NCA safety is impossible. We cannot guarantee that the results. So if we leave the computation for long enough time, we will not be able to guarantee that the result will not degrade over time if we leave it at that. The main implication is that predicting the divergence points is computationally impossible. Again, we will see. We will best see all of that in the final example. Okay. Another interesting part was from a PhD thesis that was this year also, and this is what this is a little bit closer to what I worked on. The idea being So we have, in biology, we have very complex structures like the human brain. So the human brain, all that structure, all that information, it's basically 100 terabytes of information. But from where did that information emerge? Well, that information is basically encoded in your genome. So your DNA code is basically responsible. It holds all the necessary information for you to grow that brain. That brain is 100 terabytes worth of data, but your genome is about 750 megabytes to 1 gigabyte of data. So this is an interesting aspect. From something of size 1 giga, you develop 100 terabytes of information, and this development can be seen as the development of an NCA. So maybe we can give an NCA, we can encode it with a little bit information, and it actually can produce a lot of information at the end. So the result, I think I noted here, the conclusion, the result, the brain is not, wait a minute, I think I have the wrong. Okay, the conclusion is you cannot specify the brain connection by connection. The genome must encode the generative process. So again, a little bit, I don't know if I have enough time, I might skip some details. So this is the model they used. Okay? They modeled axons as agents in the NCA. The general idea was they implemented the simple rule: if signal A greater than signal B, then the cells do something. They encode chemical information. For example, they start to encode chemical information for turning left or turning right, or to look for specific rules, to evolve the correct or the desired pattern. Let's skip to almost to the last part. Efficiency and simulation. So, another paper published this year, they tackled with the idea of NCA training skills quadratically in O squared. And they concluded that growing 4K image is infeasible. So, okay, so NCAs traditionally, so the basic form, in the basic form, they generate a high resolution image in O of n squared complexity, which is kind of the first time I read it, I said, okay, it's polynomial, it's kind of a good polynomial, it's squared, but it seems that practically even n squared is not good enough for high resolution images. So they came to a solution. They decoupled the structure from the texture. So they do the morphology at a lower resolution. So for example, 64 over 64. And then they use a differentiable U sample for the high resolution texture. So you generate low resolution in O(n squared), then you use that low resolution to approximate a high resolution result. And they adapted this with, I think, they managed for this step, they managed to improve the complexity from O(n) squared to O(n) squared over log n, which is a little bit better, and with high resolution images, you can actually, in practice, you can actually see the difference. Now, limits of perception. Another recent article did the following experiment. Given a space-time diagram of a CA, can the network classify which of, so there's the notion of Wolfram rules. The idea is that each cell of the automaton is dependent to 8 of its neighbors, and because of the number 8, there are 256 possibilities for its neighbors to influence that cell. Basically, that's the rules from 0 to 255. So the idea, can the network classify which of these 256 rules generated it? And they found out that CNNs, and by extension the update rules for NCAs, for Neural Cellular Automata, have a specific inductive bias favoring local spatially correlated features. Okay. I think we will jump to the conclusion. So the conclusion is that because a rule exists in the weight space of an NCA, that doesn't mean we can find what that rule is. So the idea is that these systems are also kind of opaque. So you don't actually can pinpoint exactly over longer periods of time which rules did exactly what to your going output. But let's see some examples of these NCAs. So this was the basic example. They grew from one particular seed, they grew the image of this little lizard. Okay. But the problem with it is, I don't know if you can actually see it, it's a little bit degenerative. So given, okay, you can see here, given enough time, it will degenerate. Okay. The next step from it was it to be persistent. You can access the link here, and you have also some details on how they manage this and the problems they encountered. So the idea was persistency. In the second step, they tried to implement persistency. How did they do this? So I think you have an interesting image here. So they grew several outputs and saw which patterns emerged most often, and said, okay, so if these patterns emerge most often, these are the desired results. And implementing a strategy based on this, they got something that's persistent. So I can leave this little lizard here for no matter how long, it will stay a lizard. And then something else, they ask themselves something else. Okay, what if I destroy the lizard for a bit? So you can see that persistency, from persistency, we can regenerate this little texture. But if we destroy enough of it, it disappears. So the next idea was, okay, let's make it persistent, but let's favor regenerating it. And now, with the idea of regeneration, if I delete even large chunks of this lizard, it almost always, well, if I delete a huge amount, it will die off. But generally, it will regenerate. So, and this was one of the starting articles that introduced NCAs. So I actually thought that this little toy was interesting. It's computationally powerful. It seems to be on par with other more traditional AI-based computational models, and I think it's an interesting topic to research. So that's why I tried at least to present the basic stuff out of it. So thank you for your attention. These are the references, and I have a bibliographic document if needed. I can share it with I have linked all the articles, the most interesting articles I could find on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you for the talk. Oh, are there any questions?
I mean, maybe I have a question. So you showed that there's like some unlearnable patterns, right? Apparently experimentally. So has anyone looked into hack proofs for these NCAs? For some places, there are some more results for this.
Can you resume the question in the mic, please? I have trouble hearing it.
Yes. So is it better now for?
Yeah, it seems to be better.
Yeah. So the question was that experimentally, apparently there is like some unlearnable patterns, right? Is what you have shown. Do you know if there is any pack proofs for this model? So like the probably approximately correct learning.
That's an interesting question. So unfortunately, I'm a bit new to the topic, but I didn't actually see anything on it, and there are quite a few articles. I don't know if I saw something on the topic. If so, you asked me. Okay, I cannot know for certainty that if I do this, I'll get this result. But what about some probabilities? All I've seen was experimental stuff. Nothing theoretical in regards to probability. But again, I don't want to say that there surely isn't. It's an interesting question, though.
Okay. Yeah.
But in this article, I think 8 articles that I've linked, there's nothing like that, which kind of leads me to the idea that probably not.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions,
okay,
I will thank the speaker again.